This is Goichi. Welcome to the Doorway to the World. Today, it's Brief History of Christianity, Episode 3. Well, in Episode 2, the last episode, we talked about the fall of the Roman Empire. And I said it would greatly affect the Western Church in Europe. But before we getting into that, I'd like to talk about something else. Also happened in about around that time, between 3rd, 6th centuries, and which is quite interesting. It's about Christianity moving forward in new ways. Around that time, the turmoil in time of the Christianity, all this big power, the Roman Empire kind of collapsed, and all those the Germanic tribes with the pagan belief came in, and all sorts of things are happening, and I believe that the Christians thought deeply about their existence, their meanings, and a couple of movements happened at that time. And one of them is called monasticism. It's about monks and monasteries. So what is monasticism? Appeared in Europe. Well, monasticism is about you will be isolating yourself from society's influence and devote yourself to God. And that kind of lifestyle and philosophy is monasticism, in a simple term. Well, all this form of monasticism appeared in, surprisingly, Egypt or Syria, around the area, not in the mainland Europe. Well, in Egypt and Syria, back in the 3rd century, there was a man called Saint Anthony, who kind of pulled himself away from the society, went into the desert, and devoted his life to seek God. Sounds a little bit like John the Baptist in the Bible, isn't it? But that's what he did, Anthony. Isolated himself from society, devoted himself to God. And he was known as the father of monks because he was one of the earlier one, one of the first one he did. And that was the beginning of the desert monastery. After him, many people went into the desert and copied what he did. But anyway, about 4th century, there was a man called Pachomius. He was actually former Roman soldier turned monk. And he also isolated himself from society, but he did not do it alone. He brought the people with same philosophy and same beliefs, the monks, to form the communal monasteries to seek God away from the influence of society. Well, while those things are happening, in the Eastern Europe, there was a man called Basil the Great appeared, and he started monasteries with his particular rules known as Rule of Basil. And this monastery, according to the Basil the Great, actually influenced the Eastern monasticism came about afterwards very greatly. And they are known as Basilian monks. And while that's happening in the East, in West, there's a man called Benedict of Nursia came in Italy, about 6th century. And this Benedict, he established a monastery with his rule. And his rules are known as Benedictine rules. And those followers of Benedictine rules in this monastery are known as Benedictine monks. And I think the Benedictine monks was one of the most well-known monks, the monasteries. When you watch the films, those medieval films, or read the stories, all those monks come about, and the monks those live in the monasteries on top of the cliffs and the mountains, they are most likely Benedictine monks. So this kind of movement was happening around that time, and people decided to come away from this corrupt world, the influence of the world, and trying to seek God and devoted himself into his kingdom. They are the monks. and monasteries. And while this thing is happening in mainland Europe, the interesting movements are happening in Britain as well, British Isles. Well, it greatly interests me because I'm living in Wales. So, what was happening, especially about 5th and 6th centuries in mainland Britain, the mainland Britain, British Isles, there's something happening. It's called Age of Saints. Well, the Roman invasion in the 1st century also brought Christianity to Britain. Remember, this is well before Constantine time, and this Christianity was very much retained the apostolic ecclesia that God intended the church to be. And that Christianity was brought into Britain in the 1st century as Romans came. And this very much original apostolic Christianity was quite rapidly spreading in Britain at that time. And at that time, in even England, the mainland Britain, there are people called Britons. They lived. See, Britons, their origin was Celtic. So some people call them Celtic Britons. But anyway, among them, this apostolic Christianity spread. The interesting story was in New Testament, 2 Timothy, book of 2 Timothy, but chapter 4, verse 21, there was a name. There are 2 names that mentioned, Linus and Claudia, in book of Timothy. They were among the Paul's kind of disciples, acquaintances, and friends. Well, anyway, some stories tell us this Linus and Claudia might possibly be a son and a daughter of a Welsh king, Caratacus, or also known as Caradog, King Caradog, who fought against Rome but defeated, and he was taken to Rome, and he presented his case in front of Roman emperor, and Roman emperor was very much impressed with this King Caradog, so he spared his life. Then when he came to when he was taken to Rome, this Linus and Claudia were with him, and there that they met the Christianity. They met Apostle Paul and taught about Christianity, became Christian. That was the story goes. And eventually they were sent back to Britain, brought Christianity, the apostolic Christianity in first hand. That was the story goes. And they had a sister called Eugene, and she also came back and established a college in South Wales, a place called Llantwit Major. Then was called Llantwit Fawr. And she brought 12 Christians with her and started this Christian college to teach Christianity. Well, this college in Llantwit Major or Llantwit Fawr later became the proper school for the Christians by a man called St. Iltard. And this college drew so many scholars and people from this Celtic world, from Ireland, from Brittany, from Scotland, from Cornwall. And then many well-known saints were educated, that story tells us. Even, the Welsh saint, Saint David, was said to be educated and trained there. Interesting. If you believe it or not, it's up to you. But even that kind of stories are there. So, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, all those apostolic Christianity was growing. So, what was happening in England? Well, England, after the fall of Western Roman Empire, there was an invasion by Anglo-Saxons from mainland Europe. These Anglo-Saxons, they weren't the Christians, by the way. They were the pagans. They believed in Norse paganism. So when they invaded and conquered England, this Christianity that brought by Romans in England was kind of wiped out, and this Norse paganism that Anglo-Saxons believed spread. Well, at the same time the Anglo-Saxons invaded England, they chased all those Celtic Britons into Scotland, Wales and Ireland. And then those people who were chased into those western north, they retained their apostolic Christianity in their place. And around that time, those saints emerged. Interesting thing is, the pagan Anglo-Saxon England was eventually evangelized by Roman Catholic Church pretty soon after, and it became Roman Catholic England. Well, Christianity in Wales and Scotland and Ireland, they were very much different from this Christianity in England. Remember, Wales, Ireland, Scotland, they retained the first century apostolic Christianity, while in England, the converted by the Roman Catholic Church became Roman Catholic Christians. So very much different. You see, because, so how come the Wales and all those places could retain their beliefs? Well, they're in pretty much isolation geographically, but also their language and culture are very much different from the Roman language. So that helped to retain that apostolic Christianity they had. Well, the Roman Catholic Church and trying to convert them over and over, but it was quite unsuccessful. And in the process, sadly, those Welsh peoples and Irish people and Scottish people were killed. But anyway, so that's the thing was going. So in Wales, especially, this first century apostolic Christianity was retained. And with that, they strengthened themselves and even dispatched missionaries to all over the place to bring this first century apostolic Christianity. And people who were used by God as an instruments for this was known as a saint. And some of the famous saints, for example, Saint Patrick, patron saint of the Patrick of Ireland, the Saint Patrick. He wasn't Irish. He was born in Britain, and some even said he might be born in Wales too. And this is the story it goes. He was kidnapped by Irish pirates when he was about 15, 16, very young, and taken to Ireland. And actually, the story says that he sailed, those pirates with St. Patrick, they sailed from Milford Haven, Pembrokeshire, in Wales, where I live. And in Ireland, the Patrick became Christian, converted to Christianity, and began his work, missionary work. Now, you can read about that, St. Patrick. How about St. David? The St. David's in Wales, patron saint of Wales, the St. David, he established the monastery and the monastic community, the big ones, and many miraculous stories are told, and very interesting. You can read that too somewhere. St. David's, yeah. Also St. Columba, he went to Scotland, founded Abbey of Abbey in Iona. All those people came out of Wales, and this was the time that saints thrived, emerged, and this was a time of monasteries and saints in Europe. You see, while this established church or this Western Roman church was struggling after the fall of the Roman Empire, God used all those remnants all over the Europe and Britain, all those places, to bring his will and his kingdom in a new ways. And he's still doing that nowadays. Those people who are disappointed in the state of Christianity or anything, do not be disappointed, but trying to look for the remnants, trying to look for what God is doing in the society now. So, the next episode, I'm going to talk about happened to Western churches after fall of Roman Empire. How they stood up, how they went forward. But meanwhile, these saints, the monks, they are trying to bring a kingdom of God on this earth as it's in heaven. It's interesting, isn't it? You can read all those stories in many books. So if you're interested in, have a look. Well, anyway, until next time, God bless.